you're going to see so much wealth creation in the future is my real point. Like more than the internet, there's about to be more money made than probably God knows when, right? Through this new world we're entering in. And the amount of new content that will be created. Imagine the funnels. And we've talked about this, I believe. The lack of the data inputs right now are actually kind of myopic because they've been trained through a certain lens or certain funnel, right? And a lot of data has been left out of what's being built. And when more and more data, I mean, all the music that exists in South America, in Asia, in Africa, elsewhere, the Caribbean, that's never, and all of beyond music, art, culture, language, that's not even part of the algorithm yet, right? That's when it gets, to me, that's when it gets really interesting.
So welcome to Doughnut Jar. Once again, we're having a conversation with Amaechi Uzoigwe, the manager of Run the Jewels, who most recently won, how many Grammys did you win?
3. Killer Mike for his solo album, Michael. 3 Grammys. Shout out to Mike and, of course, LP and the crew, who also took home trophies. So we're very proud of that.
Fantastic. All right. So let's get into it. So talk to us and give us a little bit more information about your background and how you got into the world of music and how you came together with the band.
It's a great question. I had zero plan or ambition, actually, to be in the music business leaving college. I moved to New York to be in the film business, which is where I got my start. And from that, working in film production on movies, on music videos, etc., TV. On the weekends, I would start my own hustle, and that would be directing music videos for, unsigned or indie or underground acts. And I was doing some rap videos, directing those, like super low budget on Super 8. Like, this is back in the day, but that was my way of trying to get in the game. But I had also been interning for the Black Filmmakers Foundation, which was started by Spike Lee and the Hudlin brothers. And I got an opportunity to advance my career that way a little bit. And I was convinced I was going to be in the film business, and that was my calling. But via directing these music videos, one weekend,
Which videos were you directing? Who were you directing at that time?
Oh, you would never heard of any of them, really. I mean, they were underground. This is how I bring it back to my larger point. So one weekend, I'm directing a video in Brooklyn for this rap group called Dominant Species. And during this process, they asked me they say to me, "You sound kind of smart. Would you mind reading our contract?" Because they hadn't signed it yet. So I was like, that's crazy. But, I did study philosophy and English in college, so I could read just about anything, and I'm like, why not? So anyway, I went ahead and did that. One thing led to another. I had some questions. They asked me if I'd meet with the record label, which I was like, okay, sure. As long as I get paid for shooting the video, fine, why not? So I arranged a meeting in West Village, some little diner. Show up, looking for the record label. There's no one I see that in my naive, I'd never had a meeting with a record label at that point, so I didn't know what that looked like, but I had an image. There was no one that fit that image. There was a young little teenage dude in hip-hop gear, white kid, who saw me and then raised his hand, and I'm like, this must be the label. Long story short, that was LP from one half around the Jewels as a teen, like a 19-year-old. Anyway, things just started happening quickly. I ended up managing the group. He had signed them. He used to come by my studio with Company Flow, his group, to check in on the band. And one thing led to another. They asked me to manage them. So I started with Company Flow, Raucous, Mos Def, Kweli, that whole era. And I built my own little operation independently as a manager and a record label. So Saul Williams, Mike Ladd, there were so many artists that came to our world at that point. Lyricist Lounge was recorded at my studio. I mean, it goes on. And a lot of rock acts. We had 5 rock and pop acts signed to major labels. So things were really cooking. Again, probably no one you've ever heard of, but some are still going. There's a woman in China, Forbes, who was in a group called Pink Martini, who's made them name.
Oh, yeah, I know Big Martini. Yeah, back in the day. Yeah,
I was her manager at China Forbes. Clueless, remember the Clueless TV show? We did the soundtrack for that, things like that. Anyway, so there was a handful of those acts. But I ended up really focusing on the underground, on the art, right? My partners didn't agree at the time, like we went our separate ways. But what happened was I was getting phone calls from places like, other music, record store in New York, and from people I knew, like being like, Radiohead's in here buying all of your Fiat's albums. You know what I mean? So I started seeing signs. Rick Rubin called me from a record store in London because he heard a 12-inch and wanted to sign one of my acts. So I saw early that focusing on the quality, on the art, on things that were meaningful to me, that I felt really strong about, that was sort of my beacon. It wasn't like, what's going to sell, or, blah, 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 or how am I going to make $1 million off of this tomorrow? It was like, I could do other things in life. I chose to do this because I really enjoy it, I'm passionate about it, and it's got to mean something to me. So that's sort of been my guiding light. And good things just started to happen that way. But what it also unlocked was entrepreneurship in me. I'd never really thought of myself as an entrepreneur. But we had to do everything ourselves. Record label, we literally had to do everything. And for me, a light bulb went off. Like, you know what? This is actually where I was meant. I love life, Most people aren't really comfortable with that, or eating what they kill, having to eat what they kill, so to speak. For me, it gives you purpose and passion and control and independence. So that allowed me to become a business, So we built record labels, I built a management company, a couple management companies, and I got into technology early, whether it was first website, 1994, first digital download store in 2006. So these are things that, as an entrepreneur, that have always turned me on. But also the business side, not just the deals and the making money, which is great, but how does this ecosystem work? Who are the players? Who are the operators? What are the guiding forces that are shaping this world that I'm in, or my clients are in? How do I understand that? That was important to me too. And early on, I was fortunate. I was to be elected founding chairman of A2IM, which is like the RIAA for independent music, which is half the marketplace. Multi-billion-dollar marketplace. So what we did was organize these islands of independence that were floating around into one landmass. Thus, we were able to lobby Congress. We were able to lobby all, the major players in the ecosystem for equitable rates for the independent players of the market, et cetera, et cetera. So that's always been, that's sort of, I don't know if you want to call it the administrative or the more institutional side of it, has always been interesting to me, and really more from the side of, we're outsiders. Like, I want to see who I'm dealing with, right? I really want to understand who I'm dealing with, and that's been a driving force.
So what's interesting, what you just touched on is, so you were in the business in the early days, right? So you came around and you were part of the industry as it started to transition to a digital industry, right? So you saw the whole move, right?
Well,
so
websites coming, email. I used to tell my employees, back in the day, I would talk to them about days before email, and they'd look at me like, great. Like, we used to sit around that fax machine and wait, or have to send a 80-page contract via fax. That was the old days. It's like the fun stuff. But we felt all the time.
So you went from where we were, where we grew up in the space, to the world rather, to MP3s.
Oh yeah.
Now Napster, Apple.
Yep.
Right. The iPod.
Everything.
And then Spotify.
Yep.
Right? So how is all of this? How does all this technological progress shape the artist experience and on your end, and then talk about that as well in terms of how do you think it's affected the listener experience?
It's a great question. I think for my artists, the kind of clients I've worked most closely with, they are also very entrepreneurial. I can't pour that enough, and that just doesn't mean they're trying to make hustling to make money. It means you're watching the trends, you're watching the landscape, you're watching how things are changing and impacting everything you do. So if you're producing something, whether you're in the studio or you're making vinyl, and then one day you realize, this vinyl thing, which we used to sell so much vinyl back in the day, right? Thousands of units of vinyl, right? And then one day it started to dry up. So you can either be Chicken Little and play, I cry that the sky's falling and what am I going to do? Or you can be like, okay, so where is this going? And how do we run to the front of that parade? And so we can create agency for ourselves so we're not at the mercy of the machine constantly telling us, here's your one option. You know what I mean? So you think the internet
liberated the artist? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, that was in theory it did. But again, how many people, I think a lot of these things, the internet, just like AI is being talked about and VR before that and etc., Web3, it's marketed to us like it's magic. And there's a lot of magical aspects to it, for sure. But it's not magic. Code, or it's language, or it's things that are being built, right? And so we trade education for ease of use, right? All the time, all day long. So while in theory, the internet was supposed to liberate us, did it? Because the powers that be planted themselves in that same space and started calling shots. We were too enamored of the magic and the razzle-dazzle to lift the hood and dig in and see what it's really about, how it's impacting us, what are we trading, right? It's like Facebook. Oh my God, how great is Facebook? What's that? You know what I mean? It's that thing. So we haven't been smart enough about it. And I think this is just a rule, or it's my rule. It's the way I look at the world. Most people aren't entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial in the way they think about these things, right? They're not thinking about it as an opportunity or something they have to understand or a way that they can take it, leverage it, And that's part of the lack of liberation, is the lack of actually trying to be liberated.
Yeah, when you say most people are not entrepreneurs, it's because they're not crazy, because entrepreneurship is probably one of the craziest things you can do.
Absolutely. No question about it. It's almost in the flick. Yeah. It's a high power risk and stuff, but it's also a lot of us have issues with authority. Right? A lot of us don't like to be told what to do. Doesn't mean you can't be a team player. You just don't like, you like to be your own boss. And I think and you're willing to put it on the line for that. You're willing to bet on yourself and take what comes with that. I mean, many of us have lost everything. I've lost everything twice, but I've also made a lot more and created a lot more than I've ever lost. So anyway, it's a trade.
Yeah. So now we're in this new era of RTJ. They're doing amazing things, and you're making a lot more, you're connecting with a lot more people, but at the same time, you're also like going back, right? So, I love the whole Greg Nice single. That was fantastic, right? That was great as a young person growing up in around hip hop, to be able to hear Greg Nice once again.
Absolutely.
That was brilliant. So, so talk about, how the future, how the present state of music and the future state of music, how it constantly goes back to some of the classics and across different genres, right? Absolutely. Here in the U.S. And then, obviously what we're seeing right now with the rise of Afropop and how that's coming back to some of the founders of that as well.
I mean, I think it's fascinating, and music always is, right? As it evolves, it's always referential. It's always looking back or built on something. It's really rare that somebody comes up with something completely new. And even when they do, it's still compiled from other things. I mean, James Brown created the only American genre of music. I mean, really created one, funk, invented it, right? And that's, of course, that flowed from a tradition of music, but he created something completely new. That's really, really, really rare to do, honestly. But I think where it gets interesting and very complicated in this age of AI is that up till this point, when you're looking back or sampling or digging in the crates or using the past history of music to inform what you're doing today, it was almost organic or analog in so many ways, right? It was this way of education and discovery, and your hands were on things, opening vinyl, you were communities of people, right? You're going to shows, whatever, your grandpa, your uncle, whatever the case may be, turned you on to something. Now I think, and I'm a layman, I'm no expert when it comes to technology, I'm a fan. But now I think that reservoir of information, if that is now digitized and it's an algorithmic form, it may provide all kinds of benefits and an even richer, experience in some ways. And I think those are things that I don't think you'll have that again. I don't think you're going to be having the same inputs in terms of informing how you make music like a young person. I mean, there'll be, synthetic inputs of the organic things I'm talking about, perhaps. But and I don't know. It just feels like it's just going to be a different.
Are you saying that it's going to be lacking in soul? Is that what you're saying?
I think it could be. I think there's got LP from Run the Jewels and I were having this convo not too long ago about the future of music, just sort of kicking it, and landed on this, that there's going to be two forms of music probably in the future. There's going to be machine music, and then there's going to be human music. Human music is going to mean something different than it really, something not unrelated, but not the same as what we see today. And I think that what AI and what this technology is going to force us to do is to actually be more creative.
But listen, a lot of what you're saying now is kind of like what folks were saying when sampling was coming out, right? People were saying, well, you know what? No one's playing instruments anymore. There's a lot of sampling, and look where we were for a long time. We were creating music, right? So I think that maybe simple listening in the
to that point, sampling, and I don't want to get too far afield, we make it too esoteric, but sampling is actually a great example. But there's two sides to that, because what sampling did was made it easy for especially people who didn't have the resources, right? Because this is also always a resources conversation, and who has the resources to access this. As a colleague of mine said recently, rock and roll today is for upper middle class kids who can afford to be in debt. Not go broke, but be in debt. Two different things. Now, sampling was great because it made certain things easy and leveled the playing field in some ways, et cetera, and brought in this whole new form of creativity and expression until it got legislated. But at what cost? And I built most of the art and music I've worked with is hip hop, so sampling's always been a part of what I do and my artists. But Black music specifically has had the deepest tradition of live music playing in the history of the world, starting from the continent. Black America is fundamental to the whole canon of Western music, live music, instrumentation, players, whether it was Miles and Bird or Jimi Hendrix or Prince or Michael Dino, the list, we go on for forever. I'm not blaming or, or anything like that. I'm saying, when have we lost to that process? Now, I'm definitely not blaming us, because how many people of color had access to instruments and music classes and all of these things, right? Again, I'm not trying to overcomplicate the conversation. All I'm trying to say is that if we don't really understand what's happening with the technology, really understand it, right? Understand how we can apply it to our benefit in meaningful ways, creatively and otherwise, then we'll never have real agency when it comes to this new world. And I think that it's great what you can do creatively with AI specifically. I may have mentioned this anecdote to you in previous conversations, but I found it really resonant talking to a young producer who wanted a string section for a song he was working on. He had a 9-piece string section in mind. No way he could have afforded to bring in real musicians and rehearse them and record them. He started to learn some AI music production, and he replicated what he had in his mind that way for basically nothing, and he achieved what he wanted to achieve. And I thought that was remarkable. I think you're going to see a lot more of that.
So I think that to me is extremely, it's extremely present in terms of where we're talking about right now, right? So now we're going to be able to have a young person that doesn't have the full ability in terms of how to conduct an orchestra, but they may have the creativity of our concept that they can bring to light now because of the platform.
Yeah.
And all of these
other person in particular, he had the chops. He could write his play, you know what I mean? He knew music, right? And then he could manipulate, right? And he knew how to, because he had the skill set, what it needs. He could write music, right? You can write music, then you're communicating with AI in a whole different. And that's my point. Like, we need those foundational skill sets still to really take it.
And what other ways can AI be utilized to enhance content creation and distribution for artists?
I think that it can have, there are probably a few ways. I think that creation, there's going to be all kinds of ways. That's for sure. I mean, the anecdote I just shared is one. I mean, to me, the most interesting creatives are figuring out how to use it effectively as a resource, and not be totally afraid of what this is, what it's unearthing. I think that in terms of with distribution, I don't know. I think it's probably a little early to say how it can impact distribution until we see how the larger ecosystem really, comes together. And what's available. I do think potentially or theoretically it should. But creators don't own the pipes, and until there's a different way to engage, and I do see that emerging, and I certainly see it coming from the more institutional and corporate side, there's going to be a fight for audience. This is emerging, right? Audience is everything. Whether you're Run the Jewels, who's built this incredible ecosystem and these devoted fans, right? That's an audience. If you're the New York Knicks or whatever your favorite sporting team is, right? You have an audience. Taylor Swift is obviously a current example of what audience means and looks like it can mean, and how it can impact the other audiences like the NFL, right? So audience is everything. Kanye, whomever has this audience and is leveraging it directly. Grateful Dead are probably the analog avatar to this concept. If you have an audience, there's so many different ways you can monetize. And you can choose not to monetize if you don't want to, right? Now I see like record labels, the big players talking about how do we get our hands on the artist audience even more? That's merchandise, that's the whole spectrum, yield, data. It's interesting. Instead of 360 deals, I've had conversations recently with major labels where the concept of a 3D deal was being floated, meaning name, image, likeness gets thrown into the bucket as well. And now we're talking about AI. And now we're talking about all that IP that one, that label, remember, may have at their disposal to work.
So when you say likeness, are you saying that the label would want the artist's likeness so that they could reserve the option to do interesting things around it in AI in the future?
Deals, yes. Visual deals. Yeah.
So talk to us. What do you think how do you think that plays out? What does that look like?
I think it's a slippery slope, and I think it's dangerous, and I hope they're not playing on people's ignorance and naivete with it, because it sounds sexy when you talk about movies and TV, visual, and doing all that, well, video games. But I think we also know what else they're talking about, which is moving images into the AI machine, right, so to speak, and using them that way. And that's where it gets dangerous. That's where we have to have a lot more discussion, and like honest discussion about, what that means.
So do you see that type of a deal structure as kind of the door opening to a label saying we're going to be able to create music and content without the artist?
Absolutely. And that is the absolute holy grail for some of them. You know, I've also spoken to an executive who was basically lathering at the mouth, couldn't wait for this to really happen because he wanted to pay royalties. Couldn't wait to not pay royalties or have to deal with the artist, right? And some people feel that way, whatever. I'm not even judging. That's not the world I choose to live in and operate in, you know, really. I'm about the artists. But some people, it's they're about the revenue or the profit margin, that whatever it may be, right? So AI, of course, when you know, and I'm telling you, and you know, I don't have to tell you or many of the people watching, it's damn good. It is actually damn good at this, right? And people should be scared. They should be afraid. They should be very afraid. It's going to change things forever. Now, what that means and what that means to the creators, humans, is a really important consideration and conversation that we need to have, akin to the writer's strike and the actor's strike in Hollywood when it came to streaming and AI and what that's going to, right? So music has to have that conversation.
It's interesting that we touched on this because it sounds like we could see in the next few years an artist's estate that is owned or managed by someone, label or whoever, that they'll make the decision to create new music by that particular artist and potentially new videos and a whole new album.
100%.
And it might have been dead for the last 10, 20 years, if not longer, and feasibly becomes like a banger. And it just becomes, it runs away.
I mean, I think the law of averages probably suggests most of it would not be, depending on who's doing it, right? Depending on the intentionality and the expertise and the care and things like that. That's why I think, you know, all this talk about AI coming for everyone's jobs and the AI monster, right? What it's going to be. Our own humanness, our own humanity, our own ability to craft things, to be in touch with the tangible things that a machine can never understand, process, right? Is our greatest strength. You know, if you're going to say, to use your example, Elvis, right? Not even we're talking about Elvis. Let's give a better example. James Brown. What if somebody wanted to bring James Brown back, you know, with AI? And wanted new music? That's like one of the easiest things in the world to use my language, you know, to ruin, to be trash. But maybe there's like that one person or that team of people that could actually do it right. You know, Bob Marley, list goes on. But I think it's fascinating, man. I really do. I just think it's the forces of, not to oversimplify it, but the forces of good or the forces of creation versus the forces of, I don't even say evil, but just straight capital, savage capitalism, you know, looking to exploit it at all. I think that has to be mitigated.
Right now, you're also doing a lot of work throughout Africa. So talk to us about that. Talk to us about that journey, why you're doing it, what the expectations are.
Well, it is the most, you know, exciting thing probably I've ever worked on or been a part of or had be a part of my life career in terms of my mission and my legacy as a Nigerian, as someone who, you know, from the time I was a little kid was informed by not just the culture of Nigeria and Africa at large, but lived in East Africa as a kid. Well, the music, such a big part of it, you know, of animating me and as having lived on the continent at different points in my life since very, very young and having a really deep connection to my own people in Nigeria, my own village. I always looked at Africa through a lens of just, I've always been completely in love and blown away by the continent and Africans, right? And I'm very aware of the history, but as a historian, I've lived in it. I've lived through coups, seen a lot, right? But what African people have brought to the world and the hope and the aspiration and the desire to keep going and dreaming big in the face of the most horrific obstacles, which African Americans can relate. It's really, 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 really impressive. And the brains, I'm biased, but Nigerians are off the charts when it comes to academia. I mean, just performing with that side of the brain as well as the other side of the brain, creatively, athletically, what have you. And I think it's really remarkable. And I think this is the youngest now. My friends in the business will tell you, I've been talking about Africa annoyingly to them for 20, 25 years. Like, it's going to happen. I'm telling you, get ready. It's going to happen when we get it together, when these forces come together. It's going to change the world again. And I think we're starting to see that happen. It is the audience of the future. In 6 years, 1 out of every 4 people on the planet between age 15 and 35 will be African. What does that look like? Who's your audience? Who are you talking to? Who are you selling to? One of my favorite tweets of all time, I just saw in the last year. It was a graph, like a hockey stick graph, and it said, where to sell something to a Nigerian, because the data, the population is nuts, right? And once the infrastructure and all things come together on the continent of Africa, it's going to reshape the world, right? And so why wouldn't I want to be a part of that, right, in some way? And I think that's what we are going to see over the next 10 years, just like we saw in Asia. South Korea is a great example of a country that emerged. Sort of nobody was expecting South Korea, I don't think, to come along over the last 25 years and have the impact that it's had across the board, whether it's appliances, automotive, software, entertainment, art, culture, you name it, right? But they invested heavily in that. Their government, the people did. So I think you're starting to see that in Africa slowly but surely. I think you see a talent, a pipeline, faucet, a fountain, like a talent that I've never seen and most people have never seen ever across just about every vertical you could imagine. It's mind-boggling. So for me, that's the most exciting thing I could be doing and helping build that ecosystem and bringing value back, skills training, not just making money, not just.
So what's needed? What's needed to get the talent to a wider market, to the rest of the world, right?
Well,
what is needed?
I think there needs to be. It's a great question, and we talk about it all the time. Right now, if you're talking about the African market and the African diaspora, right, you really have the continent is where the suppliers are and the buyers are in the diaspora. That's just the reality. Because most people on the continent don't have the disposable income to engage with culture and commerce in the way that we do. That will change. But right now, there is nothing linking those two market forces, and I think that's the key to everything. It's what we're working on. It's a lot of people are talking about. And when you're able to do that in big or little ways, right? It could be something as small as one of my baby bands, the Cavemen, who are in town next month in Lagos, first time in America, selling out shows left and right. Never been here before, To Burna Boy doing 45,000 at Citi Field the same month. You just start seeing it starting to over-index, and it's going to take a lot, it's time and effort and all these good things, but I'm excited to be more excited about it. And I've been saying,
let's talk about Burna Boy for a second.
Yeah.
He's active now, right? I don't know if you saw the most recent G-Star campaign. So he's everywhere in New York.
Yeah,
the billboard is Burna Boy.
Yep.
Right.
That's
a big deal.
He and my guy share the same booking agent. And the thing that I know from being friends with this booking agent for a long time and being able to have really interesting insight into how they built it. Burna Boy's an entrepreneur. Burna Boy has a vision. He did not approach it one-dimensionally or even two-dimensionally. I mean, I will challenge most people to even name a Burna Boy song, but he's still a part of, the discussion. He actually, and I say that because he hasn't had actually a huge global hit. He hasn't had a Shaggy moment, as I call it, the bombastic moment, right? Where everybody, your grandma knows that song. Everybody knows it, right? He hasn't had that, but it hasn't stopped him. And one of the things that he's done that's been really impressive to me is that the way he's moved as a star. He's moved with the whole band. He has basically demanded that we regard him that way, right? Real Nigerian approach, right? I am a star. I'm a real artist. I'm serious, and I'm the African giant, et cetera, and he's trying to back it up. I mean, NBA halftime show, selling out stadiums.
How do you see technology in helping you do your job more efficiently and more effectively in terms of supporting and identifying talent?
I mean, I think it's going to help in all kinds of ways, really. And again, I'll go back to saying that comes down to our own education and understanding of the technology. We're already using it in little ways, whether that's more CRM, data analytics, understanding our audience on the back end, making things automated, messaging, things like, little things on the back end. But going forward, and again, once there's more of a real ecosystem being powered by this, and as we all know, it's coming, $7 trillion fund Sam Altman's raising is testament to what's about to be built. But it's going to offer us all kinds of things. I think you're going to be able to find, like from touring, for example, you may be able to surface or unearth markets and territories and fan bases that align with your plight or you as the artist, right? That could be in Australia, it could be in another part of the world that you didn't even know existed, right? And you could have the data to model a way to hit different markets that may be picking up on different things that you're doing. We tend to approach it with a really sort of binary or blanket, like this is the song that we're going to shove down everybody's throats, regardless of where they are. What if on your song you could figure out or identify, well, it seems like this market would be more, they would find this song more attractive or interesting. This market would like this song, right? I met a young guy recently who's got an music AI company that's predictive AI, right? So it's learned the Spotify database, and it will take your song and match it up against that to then tell you which of your songs aligns with which of these songs that were the most successful, right? So if you could build a marketing strategy around something like that, game changing. You're going from sticking a figure in the air, basically, or saying that you did all this research and you got or you know somebody, to actually knowing what was going to work to the end user's brain, and then game changer.
But it goes both ways, right? Which is if you're saying the technology can do that, everything that you just talked about, the next step on that is to say, create a song for me that I'm gonna like as I'm getting dressed to go to work this morning.
Now you're going there. Now that's it's almost like a whole different world we're talking about when you say things like that, right? It's beyond the music business or this thing that we know as the music business. You're talking about like a whole nother iteration of everything, which is really exciting. It's really exciting. Customizing a musical, a song to you as a human, the Donovan song. That's remarkable.
Right. But we know that's coming because those platforms, and I've tested one of them already, and it was interesting.
Yeah.
And I know it's early days, right? So they don't have a lot of licensing deals that you kind of need.
That's right. I mean, that's really what's holding a lot of it back, right? They're fighting over the royalty splits of all the machine learning bootlegging that was done, right? Once they sort that out, it's open season.
It's different, yeah.
Yeah, but the amount of like cat and baby versions of what you like songs about people's cats and babies we're going to be subjected to in the future is going to be just...
In the beginning, but it's the beginning. People are getting... Look, you know how it is. It's just like on Spotify, right? Any of these platforms, these music platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, whatever, maybe 10%, if not fewer than that, 10% or less of the content consumed there is consumed by like real deep cuts music.
That's right.
Rest of the platform in terms of what's being played, it's the same music over and over. It's the top, kind of folks that listen to that stuff. Which is fine. It's fantastic. It's what's kept the industry afloat. But at some point in time, you're going to say, I'm going to be listening to a Sade song that has, backing of, Miles Davis and John Coltrane, right? So that's going to happen at some point once the licensing pieces all come together.
That's right.
Create that new experience. So
That's right.
we will see.
We will
see that.
But I think, and this is sort of a, a vague thing to say, whatever, and it's not scientific at all, but it's who can unlock their brain that way? Who can start thinking and, and seeing the world and hearing the world and all these new dimensions that you're talking about, right? I think it's people who can really sort of imagine that world and apply these things effectively. Those are the people who are going to win. Because if your mindset is, oh, I can never figure this too much for me, or I'm scared of it, right? Or you're limiting, or you're not thinking big, because what you're saying is remarkably creative. And you know what I mean? To get to that point of letting your brain accept that notion of the Sade, James Brown, Miles, Miles Davis thing, right? That's part of it too, is can we change our brains? Not the young kids, not the little ones, because they're growing up that way, but can we on the people side adapt?
And look, and I do think, obviously, we all know what the downside of this stuff could be, but I do think that the upside of it is that you have artists and you have their estates, right, their families, that could benefit from this, because 100%. Now you're creating new songs that, no one's heard a new song from Marvin Gaye for a very long time. Right now, and it starts getting a rotation, and it becomes part of the 90% of what people are listening to on major platforms. Now you have streaming fees and revenues that go back to those. They were all ripped off.
Absolutely.
Right. So just imagine if you could create, a new Muddy Waters or Howlin' Wolf track with Marvin Gaye, and those families who were able to take care of themselves based on what their family, what those guys created.
Sure.
Maybe this is that time where they're fortunate.
No benefit from, right? That's the problem. But I think there's also a whole bunch of new value and new IP and new content that will be created that will be monetizable. And the key to the future of more equity, right? So more people of color or women or whomever have traditionally been left out of the. As long as there's more opportunity for them to have a fair shot at winning, and it's up to everybody, of course. But I think you're going to see so much wealth creation in the future is my real point. Like more than the internet, there's about to be more money we're entering in, and the amount of new content that will be created. Imagine because they've been trained through a certain lens or certain funnel, right? And a lot of data has been all the music that exists. That's not even part of the algorithm yet.
About how these platforms